3, 2, 1. Da, 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 da. Hi, I'm Euclidean Vision. Welcome to this Overwatch lore discussion video where we'll be speculating on the identity of Hero 29, supposedly to be released at BlizzCon in the next week or two. I'm going to be looking at this more from a lore perspective than a gameplay perspective. There's plenty of channels, way more qualified than I am, looking at the gameplay implications, along with some lore implications. And although story isn't the only focus for Blizzard at all, or even the main focus, we know quite a bit more about the lore of quite a lot of these characters I'm going to be discussing than we could possibly do about their hero kits at present. And given some recent circumstances and speculation, returned focus to storytelling could be on the cards, and even catalysed by Hero 29, whoever they are. So I'm only going to be really covering the likely candidates, or usual suspects if you will. Anyone sort of how Moira was introduced to it's just an image, not going to be able to guess from that. Or anyone who we've just got a name for, like Hakim, people from the Petra team, Emery Sarioglu. They're little more than a name, a filicide character. I'm not going to be discussing them here. Aside from one very glaring example at the end. So I'm going to be looking at why they'd be added to the game, and therefore why they would get more story focus if they're not already quite focal in the story. Or if they are focal in the story, I'm going to be looking at why their story could lead them to joining the game. Why they could or couldn't be Hero 29, and sort of how likely I find each candidate. So, starting with candidate number 1, Antonio Bartalotti. So, Antonio.
Good evening.
That's enough out of you. I'm going to start with Antonio by saying stop. Stop it, guys. A well-designed secondary character just means that Blizzard are good at world building. No one would care about any of what Retribution was anywhere near as much if he was just a faceless no-name scrub. Just because he has a half-decent visual design doesn't mean that he's important. In fact, he is kind of important for Reyes and Overwatch's entire story. It's kind of important that he does die. Never mind that the I wasn't actually dead trope has been done to death already. Pun, super intended. But if he were to return, it would hopefully be something akin to Genji in the form of a cyborg, but maybe more machine than man, both spiritually and physically. Maybe in the form of the Heavy Assault. If anyone could be the Heavy Assault in-game, yes, Antonio fits the bill. But it'd be interesting to give him a robotic personality, or no personality, so that he doesn't affect the overall lore, and so that Genji can have some sort of dilemma as to a similar being that behaves very differently to him, that he could feel pity for, that he could be angry against, that he could see similarities with it, that could make him further question the nature of his own being. But wouldn't it be better to just do that storyline with an original character instead, so as to not fuck up the whole story? Well, for that reason, for ultimately that reason, we don't have to do that storyline, and doing anything with Antonio kind of screws up the whole story. No. Firm answer on Antonio Bartalotti, no. So on to candidates 2 and 3, because they're both quite minor, and I'm going to try and be quite quick with these. Theo and Ray, ex-Overwatch and Blackwatch pilots. Ray, just going to jump straight to this, no, he's not coming into the game. He's a Blizzard in-joke. He could be a supporting character, ferrying people around. Maybe you might pick someone up at some point and convince them to come back to Overwatch. That's about it. That's all I see from Ray. Theo is... Okay, I'm going to jump the gun on this as well. Highly unlikely to see anything from Theo. But, as she was an ex-Blackwatch agent, that suggests that she's had a troubled past, and possibly a troubled present, being probably on the run, as someone like McCree, an ex-Blackwatch agent, is on the run for being a Blackwatch agent. So... there's maybe something to see from here in just a character aspect. We do have voice acting and personality and a tiny image for, and some story context, whereas, as I said, Ray is just a Blizzard in-joke for the developers to laugh about. Great. No ideas for hero kits. We already have quite a few pilots in the world already, so there's nothing particular I can think of, and they might even just be more useful in the story, as they have been already, theoretically, as pilots. So on to candidate number 4, Athena. Athena's difficult. She's the game announcer. She could be a god program. As we've seen, she's got kind of a caring nature. She looks after Winston. She could be really useful as an advisor. She could lead into the Omnics. She could be a translator for any Omnics we come across. She could lead us into the God programs properly. Maybe even join up with them and go full on Skynet. She could, and this is the most likely method, I think, that she's going to be used in story and in game, all told. Knowledge, history, information, exposition. She's there to tell us what we need to know, I think, based in sort of how her character has worked in the story so far. She totally could do some shit. She could totally do some shit. But what? Unsure. Is there any way to like bring her into the game because of the story? Is there any way to bring her into the game despite her presence in the game? Maybe there's some workarounds, like the nature of what the sort of physical form of Athena is and how she is associated to it. Whether, say, as we've seen her theoretical body, this thing, the tentacly, weird, sleek thingy with her logo on the top, it's definitely Athena's body, guys. Is there potential that either that was a thing, like actually in canon in the past, but she has now decided to like abandon her physical form? Is it something that was like tested out but it was like unstable? Is it something that could be used going forward, either like positively that she decides to do? She's like, no, I'm going to take a physical form, I'm going to join the fight, etc., etc. Even if that's just in story, that could still be a thing going forward. It doesn't mean she has to come into the game. It would still be really interesting to put her in the game, though, like, I think, anyway. But that could also be used like negatively. Like, what if it hasn't been a thing, and Talon were to insert Athena into a body? If she's never had a body, and being a maybe god program, to use the colloquialism, because it's so obviously a colloquialism and not just like a term for a very good reason, if she got put into a body, what would she... Like, what there's no point me listing the gazillion responses she could have to that. So yeah, there's potential there for that to happen, especially given the very Puppet Master Project 2501 Ghost in the Shell direct storyline that Overwatch could totally reinterpret, because they're okay at reinterpreting anime storylines. Some of them they're not very good at, some of them they're pretty good at. If she were to have a kit, I think she'd be like a support, given like her nature. But how that would work with the whole tentacly, no idea. So Athena, highly unlikely, is my final judgment on her. I think it'd be really interesting. Definitely don't think that she'd be Hero 29, and I think it's even like highly unlikely that she'd be a hero all told. On to Candidate 5, and a bit of a wild card. Leonora Botruvio, the Omnic sculptor who's got an exhibition in Rialto, presumably linked with Talon in some way, if Rialto is, you know, as much of a stronghold of theirs as it could be, the presence they could have within the city. And if they're putting on sculpture exhibitions by an Omnic artist, like they're showing their cultural side, they're branching out into different areas, they're approaching different people. Like, I think that it's very likely that she is involved with Talon in some way, but there's quite a few ways that could happen. As she's a sculptor, could she be also involved in something like archaeology? Could she be the link between Talon and the statues, if the statues are anything? She could even be linked in that she just restored them. They were old, they were broken down. She, in her very skilled, very sensuous, Omnic way, went and restored the statues to their former glory. Or if they're something more important, like, I don't know, keys for a god program, maybe, just throwing that out there. What if she was like integral in reverse engineering, so she could figure out what they were and how they work? Maybe. Again, that's all. That kind of comes down to this, actually, like her character. Like, what could we see from a character like this? We haven't seen any dialogue, anything beyond the image and the fact that she is a sculptor, an artist, and is showing her work where she is. But, so we can now try and fit some frameworks to that. What if she were to have like a more obviously benevolent moral stance than Talon? Like, she's a good person, like very like forefrontly, very obviously good Omnic, sorry. And she is maybe even like against how Talon have used her work, but she's, for instance, like maybe stuck in the situation, or she's personally interested in the discoveries, especially if they have something to do with Omnic history, for instance, or the god programs and their relationship to the Omnics. That could give her like various stances on Talon, like I said, totally against what they do, but she's willing to put that to the side for now because the ends do justify the means, at least to her in this situation. She could be totally ambivalent, she could just be an artiste and she wants her work shown. She's got her own personal motives, and Talon just facilitate that. Sweet. She's then just going to be like, zip pays the bills, darling. That's all. That's it. But could she even then be supportive of their motives? As an Omnic, how would she feel? I mean, yeah, okay, she might have some concerns about Omnic Crisis 2, but how could she feel about some of their grander goals that obviously something like Omnic Crisis 2 is a means to facilitate those goals? Could she have somewhat of a philosophical view that she wishes to portray through herself and Talon? That, especially as an artist, most people, I imagine, wouldn't assume that a machine could create art. Like, was she made to make art? Or has she created art out of her own free will? I mean, that's kind of part, I think, of the definition of art, really. That's difficult, but I think it's way better for the story, and it fits way more thematically if, yeah, she's created this art out of her own free will. She is an artist. She wasn't made to be an artist. She became one. She's showing that she is a subjective being. She has a presence of self. People showcasing her art. She could, that's sort of that's like self-validation. Well, it's validation overall. But it's validation for Leonora. So she could be hugely thankful to Talon for what they've done, for supporting her and believing in her ideals. Expressing who she is even seems to come down to her character design. Especially, there's two ways you could take this, and I think one is more logical again. Her physical design, was she built to look like this? Or did she make herself look like this? Expressing her machine nature by altering her physical being on a level that humans can't, to show contrast, to show how machine she is, but also a comparison to humanity in that she is altering her own appearance, something that only humans really do. You can argue there's a few animals that do it to an extent, but it's a huge concept of human nature, and her reflecting that in an Omnic manner shows that she's got some self to her. She has some personality. She is a tangible being, and making art in the first place, that's a human concept. She seems to have quite a potentially interesting relationship to humans for an Omnic. She's one of the Omnics that has a set gender. It seems the Omnics that are closer theoretically to their more distinctly machine side, someone like Lynx 17, are sort of more averse to gender, whereas the Omnics who sit maybe a bit more in between, spiritually, philosophically, having a gender to them is somewhat of a closer theoretical relationship to humanity, or life, at least. You can argue that both validate Omnics in either way. That's totally cool. But it did get me thinking. Well, okay, that's not what got me thinking. Right, I can be into some weird shit. I'm not gonna lie. But Leonora Botruvio is the first robot I found sexy. She is a sensual-ass looking robot. Is that intentional? Is that something that Blizzard wanted to approach? Robosexuality has been hinted at being a thing in world. To have a character, especially an Omnic, be our actual femme fatale, because Widowmaker doesn't do much seducing. If we were to have an overtly sexual Omnic, that's one hell of an interesting character dynamic to explore. So that could be really cool going forward. Does it say anything for their potential hero abilities? Maybe. There's one or two ideas, basic ideas I have for this. That she'd manipulate some kind of construct, like her sculptures. She would maybe have a permanent construct that she could manipulate within a space, like Syndra or Orianna from League of Legends, who summon orbs and can move orbs around to do damage and move things, etc. She could also be like a spontaneous builder, maybe with like a Fortnite version of Mei with like ramps, different kinds of walls, maybe even like a jump pad. Like I'm sure I've seen plenty of people be like, why don't we have a hero who spawns a jump pad? That would have been cool for Torbjorn, for instance. And then getting on to my femme fatale idea, which I think people will hate this idea. If you could have like a charm mechanic, which would be like almost worse than a stun. I mean, you could make it so you could still perform certain actions, you'd just be locked into a set, slow movement like Ahri from League of Legends again. I don't play LoL much anymore. If I'm wrong about how these abilities work, please point that out to me. So I think there's a few interesting ways for her to go going forward with the little that we have, actually. But is she going to be Hero 29? Unless they're throwing a curveball, my judgment is unlikely. Now for candidates 6 through 9. Yeah, 6 through 9. The MEKA Squadron. I'm going to be as brief as I can with this. I really don't think they should add all the MEKA pilots yet at all, or even one of them yet. I think there's several factors to consider in order to do the MEKA Squad properly. Like releasing each one at sort of the correct kind of time, while still prioritizing more actualized, important, relevant characters from the lore. Giving each mecha unique, relevant and viable hero kits, which is possible, but it's also possible for that to not be the case. Giving each of them, again, their own interesting backstories and future prospects in the lore, which is possible, but it also could not happen, all the while still not overshadowing D.Va or making her redundant or just feeling like a copy of D.Va. Can be done. Their potential is like actually pretty huge if it's done correctly, and there's enough hints with each character to suggest that they can be fleshed out pretty well, and that there's some actually interesting character arcs here to be had. But I'll talk about them all separately in time, especially if they're not released here, which I don't really think is going to be the case. If there was one that I think personally is the best candidate going forward relative to the lore, I would easily say it's D.Mon, so as to present some internal conflict for D.Va and D.Mon's character development. Those two are so close, and there's such like clear references being made and a very obvious character relationship that could go in a ton of ways, especially as they've now set the groundwork for who D.Va actually is. So, lore-wise, I think D.Mon is the best candidate going forward. Game-wise, they should all be tanks. The mech is designed to be more durable than the average person or even like other armoured vehicle. The size of their hitboxes definitely requires them to all have pretty large health pools and or damage mitigation. D.Va's mech Toki has only has 600 HP, defense matrix and eject, which gives her like a minimum of like 760 plus HP if you do it that way. So the others have to be within some kind of range of that. It's also incredibly likely, and at least I personally think that this would be the case, that they would all have the same passive and would have slightly differing baby forms. It would make the most sense logically, maybe even balance-wise. Like, why would just one have an emergency escape hatch? That doesn't make any sense. The whole point of humans using mechs is for them to be able to get in and out of the mech, so to improve their own lesser abilities. They are separate from it, but largely dependent on it. Like, Overlord in Shooting Star wouldn't have jumped out due to the height unless you give him a wingsuit. But his cockpit can obviously open very easily for him to leave his mech at any time. So I have got some kit ideas. I've done hero concepts, like proper hero concepts for both D.Mon and King on the Overwatch forums. Links are below. Overlords, there are way too many options. I have considered a lot of them, but I haven't been able to draw up anything yet. I would hugely advise you to check out Mastery in Gamer's video where he outlines a potential Overlord hero concept. Casino, personally, there are too few options. No real idea, unless that's kind of the point. He could be an interesting character as well. We'll come to that eventually. If they are all released, if they're not put in the expansion, the expansion could be a road into this, I could see them being all released together. But like further down the line, and maybe with like a restriction in-game that limits a team to one mecha pilot in match at a time, and sort of like Diva's profile becomes like a drop-down menu of the MEKA Squad. This does have its problems, obviously, but it might be like necessary in some aspect if that is done, and especially if they're all too similar to Diva. Oh, and leave Daehyun as he is. Like, refer to what I was sort of saying about Antonio, except for the fact that he's got a way more boring visual design and equally as minimal character. I mean, he's a nice dude in that, but personally he's even less likely than Antonio. But that's fine for who he is likely in the story. Like, let him be a supporting non-hero character. Like, I think we need to get used to characters like that existing in the Overwatch universe now. It's getting big enough, and the story is maybe progressing enough that we need to start. Yeah, we need to understand that, yeah, even though this character does look cool and could have potential, it doesn't matter if they don't. It's not always a thing. Some characters can just exist to facilitate a certain act, and that's cool. That's good. That's useful. Let some things be as they are. So now for something that I will let be, I guess. Candidate 10, Lynx 17, our super sassy Omnic hacker. Personally, we need more Omnics. They're a huge part of the world, and we've got some really cool characters and designs out of the Omnics thus far, even the ones that aren't in-game, and it'd be really nice to see some more of those. That'd be really nice. Lynx 17 particularly has quite a distinctive character design, as does Leonora, as I mentioned back earlier, but the bunny ears appeals to, I imagine, too many people to be ignored at this point. They've got a very particular role and like connections in the world. They're sort of like a benevolent hacker, and obviously the kind of connections that's going to bring you into the vicinity of. They're a representative of diversity, which is a massive theme of the franchise, and they could function in like any degree of importance. They've thus far been used for exposition, character linking, like a catalyst to achieving a goal and like supporting in that goal. But then they could even move up to something where we have like genuine plot focus around Lynx 17 and their actions, for example, even into like a non-playable faction character, so like joins Overwatch in like a supportive technical aspect, if you will, anywhere up to the hero roster. They could be useful in developing Barney further, providing another different Omnic stance. I've already touched on how Lynx feels about being an Omnic, and they're really proud of being an Omnic. And something that I think really actually works in Lynx's favour is that compared to most any other character on this list, they don't have an alignment. They're not aligned with any faction. So we can sort of grow our unassociated group a bit more. And they've got the potential and opportunities to develop with other characters, like within Numbani, like Arisa and Efi. There's also been loads of quite important events in Numbani, so Lynx could use the things that have happened as sort of a driving force to like spark a story that involves a collection of characters in that sort of area of the world that maybe then stems outwards, and who knows. There's some personal conflicts that Lynx does actually have with characters in the world at this point, especially Sombra, and like having had like a long-term like initial interest in the Sombra collective supposedly, and now has almost like a settle to score, has a score to settle with Sombra following searching, having been hacked in return for being hacked. Lynx may feel all the more driven to catch Sombra now, and that's like a really simple motivation to introduce Lynx into the story, into the game and story going forward. There's also her connection to Zarya now, which Lynx seems personally interested in Zarya's like changing attitude, and Zarya might, going forward, find Lynx useful to actually be able to put her thoughts to, and get a genuine response from an Omnic's point of view that Zarya can appreciate, that could help in her like character growth going forward, which is, yeah, fucking sick. Like, Lynx has been really useful in that thus far, and I think could be useful in furthering it going forward. That and or the Sombra conflict that the three of them are all tied up in together could also lead Lynx or Zarya to Overwatch and then for the other, or vice versa. So there's loads of room in the story going forward for Lynx to be involved and do something. Is it likely that they'll be in the game? I reckon they could be in the game at some point. Likely that they'd be Hero 29? Possible. I'm going to put it at possible. I don't think it's likely. If Lynx were to have a kit, I would make them a support hacker. that hacks allies, opposing to Sombra, can only hack allies to reset their cooldowns. Optical clones. I've written ideas for like 4 different weapons and 4 different methods of healing, 2 different ultimates, both of which are pretty toxic. There's a link to that down below for my Link 17 concept in the forums. So I think it's possible. I don't think it's the most likely to be Hero 20. Candidate 11, Sanjay Korpal. Oh boy, you look so boring, but it just makes you feel all the more evil. I'm quite a fan of Sanjay. He's almost like clinical in his nature. He's kind of a scary dude to me. I like it. I like the character that you're bringing in here, Blizzard. There's a lot of potential here. Like, I think there's actually really cool, like, ideological contrast to show between Sanjay and Symmetra. As we know, Symmetra values order. I would take it from his behaviour thus far, and sort of what we can see in his actions, that Sanjay values control, which obviously the two are linked. Control enables order, theoretically, but Symmetra seems to want order without having to initiate control, that everyone should assume order themselves, whereas Sanjay is like the flip of that. He's like, no. Everyone will be ordered, because I will put them in order. They will know their station, as he says in A Better World. He's been built up in quite a few media formats, actually, mentioning that. He was like basically the secondary character in A Better World, so we got to really like see how his character works, and sort of his ideology. It seems to maybe be more his ideology rather than Vishkar's. Whether Vishkar are backing him up, they seem to be letting him do what he's doing, so... but he's also made cameos in Masquerade and the Moira origin story to reveal to us that he's in the High Council of Talon, which is impressive, especially at this point with Doomfist's reshaking of the leadership. It seems to me that you've got to be someone pretty particular to get into the upper echelons of Talon. So he's going to be really useful in developing our understanding of that, possibly, because he seems to be like one of the newest recruits to, especially the High Council, if you will. So he's like the new blood, and given his given his personality and his actions, he could be that rising star who will do anything for his own gain, and may even be gunning for the top spot. Like, imagine like a leadership contest. It's a bit more than a contest. Imagine someone like Sanjay trying to fight Doomfist for control of Talon. They're two characters that I definitely have a feeling will clash, especially like in terms of like their personality, and even maybe their goals and motivations. Like, Sanjay could back up Symmetra's words that we've heard in the using chaos to further everything. Not you, Akande. I will bring this world to order in my way. He seems like the kind of character who could do something like that. And beyond that, he's got huge importance in developing Symmetra and Lucio's stories, like especially Symmetra's. He's got a direct connection there. And we've yet to see what the Lucio-Symmetra connection is, but hopefully that'll come about soon. As for Sanjay himself in the game, he's got access to some pretty high-level technology, theoretically, and that, again, sort of fits with his character, that he's this normal dude, but through grit and resources, he will get where he needs to be. So he can likely use, like, hard light technology, the Del Santos, sonic technology, and possibly even some other kind of, like, Overwatch technology, like nano or biotechnology. TGN have done a pretty tasty kit on Sanjay where they at least use the hard light and the sonic technology, and that's like a really interesting build. That's quite cool. To go check that out if you can. I will also add, you could make him a predominantly tank but support hybrid if you were to include the nano or biotech into his kit. So what do I think? Possible, actually. Maybe even likely. He's an interesting character going forward. We know enough about him at present to easily bring him into the fold, and then he could get some like nice expansion into his character. But to maybe expand on that like a little further, candidate 12. Our slick mafioso puppet master, my boy Maximilien. Some people are going to hate this because I think that he's got such huge chances, and I know that there's there are actually some concerns with Maximilien. There's concerns with all of these, but Maximilien, I feel, has got a lot of chance going forward. He's one of the most interesting characters in the lore all told, I feel. Most intriguing, we'll say. He's the most like classically human Omnic. He looks the most human and behaves the most human out of all the Omnics we've seen. He cares about money, seemingly, which is, again, a very human thing. It's a very human behavior. He's also like in the center of the new leadership of Talon. This Omnic has been working hard, man. Like, regardless of whether this guy becomes a hero, because there's quite some valid potential in his character that he does just use subterfuge, manipulation, his position and power to get done what needs done, and he doesn't lift a finger himself. I have my concerns about that. Man's doing well for himself, but he's been in the high end of Talon for a long time, and this is the kind of place that you can get killed by your own allies just for your place to be taken. For instance, like, Talon is not a regulated, ethical organization. His predominant ally, seemingly, as he mentions, he has history with this guy, which is really interesting, which, who knows what this means. His closest ally during any of the time that we've known him is Doomfist, supposedly. All the time that Doomfist was in prison, did Maximilien really get away with surviving off just his subordinates when he's an Omnic that a lot of people will have weird feelings about, and he has probably the most money out of anyone in Talon? Do you know what greed is? Do you know what it does to people? Yeah, like, I don't think Maximilien is getting by on smarts alone. Like, this is the upper echelon of Talon. Like, every person in this room is of an insanely high intellect and is incredibly combat proficient. I imagine that Maximilien has got some things to show us, but of course he doesn't show you them. He's got his poker face on. He's playing cards. He's not showing you his hand. He wants you to think that he's only interested in money and that he would have all his lackeys do everything for him. Even though we've seen him in more media formats than Sanjay, like Masquerade, the Moira cameo, the Retribution tease at the end, the fact that he was brought up particularly, shows that there must be a bit more to him. And the weird thing with him having a player icon, you can take that either way, that it's there as a tease, or it's there to be this is a character from the universe, to be represented in a player icon, but they're an NPC. All of this sort of builds into the fact that we actually don't know much about his motives. As I've said, given being in the upper echelon of Talon, he's got to be able to take care of himself. That seems evident to me. But what does he want? On the surface, it seems, yeah, like I said before, you could happily say he only cares for money, which is still kind of interesting for an Omnic, a sort of address, but it's far more likely seemingly there's much more to his motivation than that, especially given his history with Doomfist and how prevalent he's been in Talon, and it's especially post-Retribution. He mentions to Doomfist that he respects those with vision, and if you've ever watched Berserk, you know that if you're like Griffith, if you only really respect those with vision because they're the only people that you respect because you likely have grander visions yourself. So he could be playing everything from the shadows. He could present us a really interesting Omnic perspective. He seems to approve of the Omnic Crisis too. Or is he just using that vision? Is he using that person and pushing onwards for his own, maybe less visionary goals, maybe more visionary goals? Who knows? And this sort of builds into a sort of interesting dynamic between him and Sanjay. We've got some rather tangible character motivation for Sanjay, comparatively, which means that when he gets added into the game, what we'll get is more like clarification as to his character. Whereas with Maximilien, we know little and can surmise little, but we definitely have the suggestion that there's more to him than seems, so if he were to be released, we'd be getting quite a bit of story on him, and especially given his history, his position, etc. This also could be just the fact that he is a minor character, even though I think he's got plenty to do in the story. And yeah, he could stay as a secondary character, like a non-playable character, and he could even be combat proficient, even if that is the case. Like, it could just make sense in world, but it's maybe not enough to put into the game, or he prefers the subterfuge, like manipulation, to such a degree that he barely ever has to defend himself because he's that good. He so rarely does that most anyone would assume that he has no combat prowess, and he uses that. He uses it as a facade to be like, oh yeah, I'm the casino owner. I'm the money guy. Of course I'm just the money guy. Of course I am. Oh, what's that? I killed you. Yeah, Maximilien I think has some like a really interesting potential going forward. In terms of a kit, I've put one up on the forums. I feel he would revolve around magnetism, have like a railgun in his hand, so he can just shoot coins at people. I mean, please tell me that a slickly dressed casino owner Omnic flicking a metal coin into someone's face at like several times the speed of sound isn't badass. Please tell me that's not badass. I've also got a bunch of other abilities for him. I've put the kit down below. Go check that out if you like. I think Maximilien is a likely candidate. Yeah, I don't think he's the most likely, and as I've sort of said, he could even never become an actual playable character. I still think he's an important character in terms of the story. So that leads me on to my penultimate character. Candidate lucky number 13. Lucky for me, because I get to talk about fucking Tank Girl. Junker Queen. Junker Queen. Yes, I think Junker Queen is an insanely good idea for an addition to the cast. Giving us a more antagonistic hero, or maybe even a new villain, developing the Junkers to give them an actual cause, reaffirm their ideology, establish them as a full faction, to sort of be able to give comparison to the other Junkers so we can see how they each experience the situation. Like, Junkrat revels in the chaos. Roadhog is just dripping with hatred and nihilism. But there's like a tiny little glimmer of hope in a little squeaky Pachamari in there. So what is the Junker Queen by comparison? Like, is she trying to like reject society by what she's doing, or is she trying to rebuild it? And she wants to actually give everyone a real place to call home, which is like a nice goal. But in the situation, she's got to be fucking ruthless to achieve it. Does she like revel in the struggle or the perseverance? Like, she likes that challenge. Like, yeah, chuck me down in the mud, I'm still going to climb back up. Like, does that like prove her humanity to her? Does she love being the underdog, or has she become the queen to sort of settle some insecurities in herself? Becoming the queen allows her to be the queen. Seeing herself as queen like helps her self-confidence. After everything that's happened down in Australia, we don't know what's happened to her. She could be an emotional wreck inside, but as long as she gets to be the queen, as long as she gets to scrap it out in the scrapyard, she's okay. What's that? We just made a junker like sympathetic. What happened there? But can you see what I mean now? That the Junker Queen allows for such expansion on what the Junkers are and what each of the characters associated with the Junkers are. Even Hammond, who's like said, I'm not a Junker, man. Like, I don't care about this. She seems to have like a relationship to MEKA Rutledge, to Roadhog. Like, is he the old king? Do they have any kind of further relationship than that? Did he hurt her personally rather than... Who knows? And then in relation to Junkrat, no idea. She probably just fucking hates him. But actually, as I brought up Hammond, I think there's a kind of an interesting little pattern with the Junker Queen. I've seen people say, like, oh, I don't want to see another Junker, and, you know, Hammond has said he's not a Junker. But could this be a parallel to Orisa and Doomfist's release, where Orisa was released as sort of this wild unknown to build us into the mildly known Doomfist, so that their stories made sense and, like, built upon each other as they were released? Hammond, being kind of a largely unrelated, unaligned character, sort of the most nothing character in the world at present, and that's kind of cool. I'm all right with that now, finally. Having him go from Horizon Lunar Colony to Junkertown allows us to just get a tiny little extra peek at Junkertown, so that when the Queen comes out, she's had that understanding built around her, like just a little bit more, just so that when she is released, she's understood enough that expanding on her story is, like, really easy. So, not saying it's the case. Could it be? I think there's potential. Like, she's shown in the background of the Hammond teaser, like the champion arrives, or whatever it's called. She's in the background of that, like the clearest image that we now have of her. Like, she has blue hair. She has a voice actress. There's, as I've mentioned, there's more than one iteration of, like, canon artwork of her, so she seems key in some way. Someone who's the queen of the Junkers isn't able to have a hero kit to be a hero. Are you fucking kidding me? Of course she can have a hero kit. Like, have you seen what the shit that's lying around in fucking the scrapyard? She's mentioned that she's got a mech. Like, she must have a mech if she's, like, completed and won at the scrapyard. So, girl definitely gonna kick some ass, man. Girl gonna kick some ass. She's gonna be fun. I think she's more likely to be a DPS, maybe like a bruiser, and I think that she could use, like, a multitude of weapons, like this weird, like, anchor axe, this, like, exhaust spear, which might be able to, like, pin people to walls or explode, or think Bioshock guys, and this thing, which is like a shish kebab. It's like a saw blade with a flamethrower attached to it. It's a fucking Fallout 4 shish kebab, Fallout 3 shish kebab, whatever. I haven't even made a tank girl reference yet. Her ultimate, she should totally summon a sentient tank by whistling. It's just there. It's gotta happen, you guys. You could even maybe, like, guide it like a Torb turret, so you, like, select who it aims at, which is maybe why they've brought that piece of kit into Torb's kit now. Ultimately, I'd suggest even checking out Master Ian Gamer's discussion on the Junker Queen at present. He goes a bit more in depth than I have in this. I think that she's an incredibly interesting hero going forward. Which brings me to my last one, who is not as likely as the Junker Queen. The Junker Queen is the character I find the most likely to be Hero 29. The final one, who is unlikely, but possibly the most important character, possibly Liao. If they are ever introduced, it's probably going to be to spur, like, huge change, and could even be, like, the final character they need to get everything in place for where they can go, right, we can actually now progress the story onto the next stage. Who knows? Kinda who cares? As I've said that, there's a character I actually forgot about. It's a character I totally forgot to speak about, despite the fact that they're actually quite well developed. Sven, from the Destroyer comic with Torbjorn. He's got a half-decent character design. This crazy, like, backplug thing seems to power the giant mech he's controlling. Could that be an element of his kit somehow? Unsure. He's got a pretty defined ideology, like wanting to essentially put everyone in their place and rule over everyone. Which, scary guy. Like, you know, he's got motivation. Well, you know, that's if Torb's wrong and it's not just spin for his own power gain, etc. But ultimately he's been shot in the foot, probably locked up, and no one's spoken about him in ages, I don't think, even though, despite the fact that he's actually rather well developed, he seems to have, like, combat proficiency. Like, he pulls a gun straight at Torb. I mean, Torb fucks him up, but so because of that, especially because of it's because it seems that nobody really cares about Sven. I'm going to say that Sven is highly unlikely. So, anything else? I have been wondering if, with Hero 30 coming up, I know not now, with Hero 30 on the horizon, theoretically, and with that being some kind of like a milestone, at least, hitting 30, the 30th hero, yada yada, is like Hero 30 going to be more important and Hero 29 less important to the story overall? Or could they, especially given like some of the state of the game at present and how it's the sort of the press it's been getting, if you will, the sort of response from the community, what if they were to release 2 heroes simultaneously? So this BlizzCon we get taken up to 30 heroes, if not the expansion. I mean, if there's an expansion, I can see most of MEKA, or no, we get all of MEKA and maybe some of these other characters added into that, or none of them, and it's kind of a more just average Joe in the Overwatch universe thing. Who knows? As I've said, I think the Junker Queen is the most likely. I would put Maximillien at a close second, like both are relatively close to the top, as like either would hugely expand either faction they're involved in if they were released. Like the Junker Queen can give us a massive kickstart and a boost into the Junkers, and Maximillien can expand upon 2 already relatively understood ones, Talon and the Omnics. Like, we can gain a lot of information from him coming into the game, from both of them coming into the game, and loads of like story arcs going forward as well. So with Maximilien contributing 2 more currently understood and like fleshed out bodies within the game, he might either be more useful now to push things along, or he'd be better used later when we've had all the setup that we need from everywhere else and things need to find a like kickstart into overdrive. That's when Maximilien could also be very useful. Sanjay, I feel, is a close third. Doesn't seem to have the history and therefore like possibly importance to the overall narrative that Maximillien does within at least Talon, etc. But that could be like the reason he's released now, to like further more side plots and character developments, like Vishkar, Symmetra, Lucio, his relationship to Talon, so like giving us more glimpses into how Talon works before we use Maximillien to fully dive into like the history of what this newer iteration of Talon is. So yeah, if 2 are released together, like I mentioned, I would see it being Max and Sanjay, so as to really like flesh out Talon in one fell swoop, especially if the Overwatch story is actually moving towards recall sometime soon. If that is the case, then I can see them fleshing out Talon. Or, alternatively, yes, fleshing out the Junkers so that maybe the middle party, if you will, or the neutral party in the conflict is at least present as a body within it before they actually move the story forward. So, I hope you like my thoughts. If you have any of your own, if I've missed any obvious characters out, or if I've gotten a character like totally wrong, or you think that I've maybe made the wrong judgment on who it's gonna be, chuck it down in the comments below. Any discussion would be appreciated. I've been trying to put as many links to any potential hero kits that are involved with this as possible, so we can all like maybe imagine what it's going to be like in game, if it's any of these known characters. There's also plenty of ways that they can move the story forward. So yeah, I think Hero 29 could be hugely exciting. It could also be just a total randomer and shrug. So that remains to be seen. Hopefully you appreciate this and it's given you some ideas as to who we could be seeing. I've been Euclidean Vision. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you again sometime soon. Please subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed what I've had to say. And always remember to appreciate your best girl. Ooh.